Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in Europe? For many Americans who decided to take the leap, the experience has been a real eye-opener. From the food to public transport and from safety to the pace of life, the differences compared to the United States are truly surprising. Some differences are subtle, others less so, but they all leave their mark, don't you think? In today's video, we'll show you 12 things Americans usually notice when they move to Europe. Get ready, because some of these will make you want to pack your bags right away, while others might make you rethink the American way of life. Stay with us until the end, and tell us in the comments which of these realities surprised you the most. Well, first of all, safety feels different here. Many Americans who move to Europe immediately notice a difference in how safe they feel on the streets. In many US cities, violence and crime are a constant worry. The thought of walking alone at night or letting kids play outside unsupervised is scary for many. However, in many parts of Europe, this worry is much smaller. The rate of violent crime is much lower, as is the risk of getting into trouble. In Europe, mass shootings are practically unheard of, which really strikes Americans. It's normal to see kids and teenagers going about their day in the city without needing an army of adults nearby. Many cities are designed for pedestrians, which makes life easier for those who walk, without that sense of danger you feel in many American cities. But hold on. This doesn't mean that Europe is 100% safe, right? After all, crime exists everywhere. There are always petty criminals trying to scam tourists, thefts in crowded places. The difference is that, in general, people don't feel that constant fear they feel in the United States. For those used to living on high alert, this sense of tranquility is a huge change in everyday life. Second, the food is fresher and more real. One of the things that strikes Americans the most in Europe is the taste and quality of the food. From the first bite of a freshly baked baguette in France to the quality of the products in the local markets of Spain or Italy, the difference is obvious. Many wonder why the food in Europe seems better, and the answer lies in the way food is produced, sold, and consumed. In Europe, the law is much stricter regarding chemical additives, preservatives, and genetically modified foods. Several ingredients allowed in the United States are banned in the European Union for health reasons. This means that the food not only tastes different, but is also more natural and less processed. Another thing that matters a lot is the culture of buying fresh produce. Instead of doing a giant grocery shopping once a week, people in Europe prefer to go to the local market, where they find seasonal fruits, vegetables, meat, and fish. Not to mention that the products generally travel less from the farm to the consumer, which keeps them fresher and tastier. And even the way of eating makes a difference. In Europe, the meal is a time for pleasure, not just to satisfy hunger. It is very normal for people to take some time to enjoy a good lunch, very different from the American frenzy of eating in front of the TV. In third place, public transportation here is amazing. In the United States, having a car is almost a necessity in most cities. Distances are long, public transportation is not great in many areas, and cities are designed for cars. But when an American moves to Europe, they discover that getting around without a car is totally possible. Public transport in Europe is efficient, affordable, and in many cases, even faster than driving. In cities like Berlin, Madrid, or Amsterdam, you can get to any point in the city by metro or train. Even in many rural areas, trains allow you to travel comfortably without relying on a car. One of the biggest advantages is the ability to easily travel between countries. In the United States, you can drive for 6 hours and maybe get to the next state without major cultural differences. In Europe, on the other hand, in 6 hours you can cross several borders and arrive in a country with a different language, a different cuisine, and a different history. This ease of traveling between countries on high-speed trains like the Eurostar or TGV is something that constantly amazes Americans in Europe. Add to that the environmental issue. Many Europeans choose public transport or cycling instead of cars, which reduces pollution and traffic jams. In cities like Copenhagen or Amsterdam, the bicycle is the main means of transportation, something unthinkable in most American cities. In fourth place, life isn't just about work, right? In the United States, work culture is like the roots of an ancient tree, deeply ingrained. Being productive and always available is like a chant. Those who take a break even feel guilty. In Europe, however, the story is different. Balancing work and personal life is the law. Europeans know how to separate the wheat from the chaff, work from private life. In many countries, the workday is shorter, and in some places, shops and offices close early to allow people to enjoy the evening. In France, for example, the law guarantees the right to disconnect from work. No answering emails or work calls after hours, and vacations? Well, those are amazing. While in the United States, many have only 2 weeks, in Europe, the norm is to take 4 to 6 weeks of paid vacation. And the best part is that they use this time to the fullest, without guilt, traveling, relaxing, and enjoying life. Coffee break? In Europe, it's sacred. In many cities, people have lunch calmly without rushing, no meals eaten in front of the computer. For those who live in the American frenzy, this change of scenery is a breath of fresh air, a new perspective on work. And fifth, the healthcare system won't bankrupt you. For Americans, healthcare is one of the biggest financial worries. A visit to the doctor can result in bills of hundreds or even thousands of dollars, and many people end up avoiding going to the doctor for fear of the cost. In Europe, access to healthcare is completely different, being one of the biggest culture shocks for those moving from the United States. In most European countries, healthcare is free or much cheaper than in the United States. Depending on the country, residents have access to hospitals and doctors' visits without having to worry about exorbitant bills. Even in countries with mixed healthcare systems like Germany or France, healthcare costs are much more affordable. Even medications are cheaper, as many are subsidized by the government. Instead of paying hundreds of dollars for a treatment, in Europe, prices are regulated to ensure that essential medicines are accessible to everyone. The psychological impact of this is huge. Americans living in Europe discover that they can go to the doctor without financial stress, and this completely changes their relationship with health. In sixth place, the pace of life is more relaxed. One of the first things Americans notice in Europe is the pace of life, much more relaxed. In the United States, productivity and efficiency are like mantras. The result? Packed schedules, the constant feeling of racing against time with no time for anything. However, in Europe, time seems to have a different rhythm, and the difference becomes clear at meal times. While in the United States, it's normal to eat quickly in the office, in the car, or even standing up, in Europe, eating is a time for a break and enjoyment. Imagine France, Spain, Italy, lunches of an hour or more with no rush to get back to work. It's the reality. And speaking of breaks, Sunday in Europe is sacred. No shopping malls and supermarkets open like in the United States. Sunday is the day when shops close to allow people to enjoy the day with family and friends. This tradition of Sunday rest is part of European culture and contributes to a better work-life balance, but be careful. This more relaxed pace doesn't mean that Europeans are less productive. In fact, countries with shorter working hours, such as Germany and the Netherlands, have high levels of efficiency and quality of life. The difference is in the mentality. Life doesn't just revolve around work. Work is just a part of life, not the other way around. It's a nice change for many Americans who end up rethinking their priorities. Number 7, multilingualism is the norm. For many Americans, living in Europe is a real eye-opener. Most Europeans speak at least 2 languages, and in many cases, 3 or 4. In the United States, where English is dominant and few people are fluent in another language, this can be a real culture shock. From a young age, Europeans grow up in a multilingual environment. In countries like Switzerland, Belgium, or the Netherlands, it's common for people to speak English, French, German, and even regional dialects. In Nordic countries, English classes are mandatory from a young age, which means that a large part of the population is bilingual or trilingual. This influences the way Europeans see the world. Speaking multiple languages allows access to information from different cultures, to read news from different points of view, and to communicate with a much larger number of people. Americans living in Europe often feel the need to learn the local language to better integrate, which helps them develop a new appreciation for linguistic diversity. Multilingualism is also very useful when traveling. In Europe, it's normal to travel from one country to another, and speaking multiple languages makes communication easier. In contrast, Americans have less contact with other languages in their daily lives, which makes this difference even more apparent when they move to another country. 8th, the sense of community is stronger. In many parts of Europe, daily life revolves around the community. From local markets to squares in the heart of the city, the urban structure encourages social interaction. For Americans accustomed to a more individualistic and car-dependent lifestyle, this difference can be a surprise. In the United States, many cities are designed with vast suburbs where houses are far apart and people travel mainly by car. This can lead to a greater reliance on planned gatherings for a social life. In Europe, on the other hand, people walk more, use public transport, and meet friends or neighbors in cafes, squares, or parks without having to set a specific time. It is also common to have stronger ties with neighbors. In many European cities, people know who lives on their street or building, and it's normal to greet neighbors with a good morning or good evening. In smaller towns and in the countryside, this closeness is even stronger, with local markets where everyone knows each other and festivals that bring the community together. For Americans who tend to have a more private lifestyle, this sense of community can be a unique experience. Living in a place where social connections are more natural and frequent can make everyday life more connected and fulfilling. Number 9. Higher education is affordable. One of the biggest differences for Americans living in Europe is access to university, right? In the US, university costs can reach hundreds of thousands of dollars, forcing many students into debt for decades. Oh my gosh. In Europe, the cost of higher education is much lower, even free in many countries. How amazing is that? In Germany, Norway, or Sweden, public universities don't charge tuition fees, not even for international students. In other countries like France or Spain, the costs are very low compared to the United States, which allows young people to study without the burden of huge debt. In addition, there are scholarships and government grants that further facilitate access to university. But it's not just about money, you know? In Europe, the approach to education is broader and less focused on profit. They value a variety of fields of study and the opportunity to explore different areas without the financial pressure of having to choose a career that makes a lot of money. For Americans who grew up with the idea that college is an expensive investment that has to pay off, this difference can be hard to understand. The ability to access high-quality education without going into debt completely changes the vision of the education system and future prospects. At number 10, fashion and lifestyle are different. One of the first things Americans notice when they move to Europe is the difference in how people dress. In the United States, casual clothing is common for almost every occasion, while Europeans tend to dress more elegantly and with more refinement. In countries like France or Italy, personal style is very important, and clothing reflects a certain sophistication, even in everyday life. Europeans value quality over quantity when it comes to clothing, and they invest in well-made pieces instead of buying a lot of cheap clothes. Another interesting aspect is the mindset towards consumerism. In the United States, consumerism is strongly encouraged, and stores are designed to encourage impulse purchases. Consumerism exists in Europe too, but the trend is to value sustainability and timeless design instead of following every fleeting trend. Additionally, fast fashion is less widespread in Europe than in the United States, and many European brands prefer sustainability and quality over mass production. For Americans living in Europe, this way of consuming can be a nice change, one that teaches them to value quality and design in their clothes and in other aspects of their lives. The past. History is around every corner. For Americans used to cities that are relatively new compared to Europe, the constant presence of history is impressive. In Europe, it's not unusual to live in a city with buildings that are centuries old, cobblestone streets that have been around since the Middle Ages, and historical monuments that are part of the everyday landscape. Countries like Italy, Greece, or Spain are full of ancient ruins, castles, and cathedrals with centuries of history behind them. In many European cities, ancient architecture coexists with modern life, and people can have their morning coffee in a plaza that has been there for over 500 years. This connection to the past gives Europeans a different perspective on time and culture. For Americans coming from a country with a much shorter history, it can be fascinating to live surrounded by this historical richness and change their view of the world. Number 12. A newfound appreciation for the United States, and a little bit of culture shock when they come back home. After a year in Europe, many Americans come back seeing their own country with fresh eyes. Despite all the good things about Europe, expats start to appreciate certain aspects of life in the US even more. As soon as they step foot on American soil, some experience reverse culture shock, having to readjust to American life. One of the things many expats miss about the US is the American entrepreneurial spirit. In the US, the culture of innovation and starting something from scratch is much stronger. In Europe, where stability and tradition hold more weight, dreaming big can seem less encouraged. And then there's the sense of efficiency and practicality that many miss. In the US, stores are open 24/7, service is fast and direct, and the customer is always right. Mentality reigns supreme. But some things can be a little overwhelming when you return to the US after living in Europe. Food portions seem enormous, cities seem made for cars and not people, and the rampant consumerism in advertising and shopping malls is much more apparent. Even getting used to tipping at every restaurant can be strange after some time in Europe, where service is already included in the bill. The beautiful thing about living in Europe is that it doesn't just change how Americans see the world, but also how they see their own country. Many come back appreciating certain aspects of American culture more, but also with a more open mind and a different idea of what quality of life truly means. Living in Europe isn't just about changing your address, it's about changing your perspective on life. The safety, the quality of food, the efficient public transportation, the slower pace of life, and the strong sense of community are just some of the differences Americans notice when they move here. But the most interesting thing isn't just what Europe offers, but how this experience makes many people rethink their own culture and habits. Did you already imagine all these differences? Which ones would you like to discover for yourself? Tell us in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. See you next time.